Good evening. Welcome to CE5 UK's latest meditation training with Jamie Bazil. Jamie is going to be doing meditation for contact workers, Zen and the Art of CE5 this evening. And Jamie, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, James, for having me here, having me back even. Yeah, we're going to look at meditation for contact workers. And I've subtitle is Zen and the Art of CE5. I kind of just got that from the the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. So this isn't about Zen as such. It's not a specific type of meditation that we're going to look at. What we're actually going to do, we're going to look at meditation generally and kind of get a lay of the land. I'm going to give share a map of consciousness, which isn't based in one particular theory or wisdom tradition or religion or anything like that. And it's not even based in CE5 as such. It's something that's universal. And so I think it's a the map is not the territory, but it's helpful to have a map, if that makes sense. Helps us to not get lost. So we'll look at the lay of the land. We'll look at this map of consciousness, and we're going to dive into meditation, like how to get into deep meditation and how to do that easily. I mean, it shouldn't be a difficult thing. It's not a difficult thing. I think you just got to find your way of meditating, and so we'll be exploring that, and we'll be exploring the relevance of meditation states of consciousness to CE5. So yeah, that's basically it. And I'm going to go through some tips and tricks to help you meditate deeper than a Zen monk. And we'll also even look at technology and various things that can help you to experience deep meditation quickly. Of course, one of the things with contact work is that meditation is a big part of what we do. And so it's something that we really want to kind of get to grips with. People can make contact simply by having intention. I would say that's the number one, but the meditation helps us to calm our mind. It helps us to connect with ourselves, with the environment, with the group of people that we're CE5ing with, and connecting with nature and then the stars. And it helps us with a lot of things in contact work. So we're going to look at it across the spectrum, really. It's going to be quite a broad view, the lay of the land, as I call it. And it's going to be quite a lot to take on board, I guess, but we are also going to have, throughout this workshop, we're going to stop to have some meditation breaks. We're going to have various techniques. So I'm going to talk about those, but we'll actually get to experience some of them in the session and basically meditate during the session. So we'll actually get to explore this, not just intellectually, but also practically, experientially. So first of all, what is meditation? Well, it's not what you think. That's one thing I've heard over the years. Meditation is not what you think it is. It's not what you do. It's who you are. And I like that one as well, because meditation isn't a doing. We sometimes get confused with that. We think meditation is sitting down like a Zen monk, sitting still, legs crossed, maybe like a yogi, chanting Om. And it's this thing that we do. But in this kind of idea is that it's not what we do, it's who we are. In a sense, meditation is just realizing who we are, or more of who we are. Another way of saying this is that we are human beings, not human doings. We are human beings. So in that word being is be. So meditation is about just being. Now, that might seem a little bit up in the sky. So let's just kind of ground the idea of meditation. So let's just look at it in a more kind of practical sense. It helps us to focus. Or I could say to meditate, you do need to be able to focus. But meditation itself is a form of focus training. So in meditation, we're actually training our focus. Now, in meditation, there's many different types of focus. We can focus on one thing. This is the kind of focus that we're used to in everyday life. This is where we produce a lot of kind of beta brain activity, and too much of that can be stressful. So we're kind of like focused on getting our work done or worrying about something, you know, that kind of everyday focus, focusing on an object. When I focus on that object, I can also I can focus onto the object with a kind of a pointed, single pointed focus from a single pointed focus within myself. So it can kind of be like, almost like it's like this, focusing from here to here. But another way that we can focus is I can focus on the point, but from an internal diffuse awareness. So it's kind of like this, and then it focuses inwards. But there's all the different possibilities, and this is part of this is not something people are often aware of in their own consciousness or meditation, but this is something that you actually do practice in meditation, whether you're conscious of it or not. So we can also have diffuse awareness on the outside to single pointed focus within. We can also have diffuse awareness within to diffuse awareness outside. And we can also experience all of that all at the same time, all of that those different types of focus. We can experience all of those simultaneously, and that's mastery. But basically in meditation, when we talk about focus, we're mostly interested in keeping our focus on maybe it's a mantra, maybe it's an idea, maybe it's a feeling of love, focusing on that one thing. And then there's what we call mindfulness. So like way I like to think of this is like focus is kind of like this, and mindfulness is like that. And mindfulness is that just kind of openness to everything. It's, in a sense, it's still a form of focus, like I said earlier. It's a diffuse focus. So this is where some people get confused with meditation and actually struggle, because they think, to meditate, I've got to have an empty mind. I've got to focus on my breath and not have any thoughts. Over the years, I've moved away from that more towards what I would call mindfulness. It's kind of like I can have thoughts, but I'm still meditating. There's still this awareness of the thoughts. There's still this awareness of the noise, the distractions, and that's fine. It's still meditation. Anyway, focus, that's part of meditation. Awareness, mindfulness, we've already talked about that. Awareness, maybe talk about it a little bit more. Awareness, when we're experiencing meditation, we're being more self-aware. We can also be more aware of the environment and everything else around us too. But often with meditation, we close our eyes, so it's more of an internal awareness. And when people meditate, they actually develop self-awareness. You become more aware of yourself. And in turn, you become more aware of other things like your interaction with other people and the world. So that looking inward builds self-awareness. Some people are afraid to look within. Some people are afraid to switch off the TV and sit in silence. I've met people over the years like that, where it's like a fear of silence or a fear of being alone. And really meditation is the opposite. It's in some practices of meditation, it can be sitting in silence, sitting in the dark, and focusing inwards and being totally open to whatever is arising in your experience. Another aspect of meditation is relaxation. So normally meditation, we're not in a fearful and anxious state, or we're kind of lots of beta activity and overthinking. We are kind of moving into the opposite of fight and flight, into relaxation response. That said, we've got to be careful there not to think that if I'm walking down the road, therefore I cannot be in a meditative state. I can. There is such thing as walking meditation. And in fact, any activity that you could do, that can be a meditation. So for some people, exercise can be meditation. Another aspect is that we'll see physiological changes that indicate relaxation. We'll see changes in the electrical rhythms in the brain. the brain tends to slow down. We might see some really fast activity in the brain that occurs more in people that are experiencing meditation or when they're in a certain state of consciousness. We'll also see shifts in the electrical activity or the magnetic field of heart. So that's EEG and EKG. And what happens is the brain and the heart also synchronize and come together. In fact, we're resonating with all the cells and all the organs within our body. Just as the two sides of the brain start to kind of synchronize and come together as one, the whole body comes together as one. Body and mind, conscious and unconscious and superconscious. And if we continue that process, of course, when we interact with what we perceive as the outside world, we come into a oneness with what is perceived as the outside world, realizing that really everything is you. Everything is consciousness. We also have altered states of consciousness in meditation. So these are all the different kinds of states and peak experiences and spiritual experiences that you can have. And there's so many of them. It's on an endless spectrum. So we talked about hemispheric synchronization, heart and brain. I've already done that bit. So looking at my notes, I've got to keep myself on the track. The other aspect of meditation, we kind of touch on it, is ego dissolution, or what some people call oneness. So it's that sense of there's less of a barrier between myself and the world. It's not so much, oh, it's just me looking out or being separate. There's a sense of connection and oneness. Then another aspect of meditation that you'll often hear talked about is the idea of transcendence. But I don't really like that word, because transcendence means to leave something behind, or to push it away, or to kind of eliminate that from my reality. That's not healthy, and it's certainly not the way to go in meditation. Yeah, we want to be honest, when we experience meditation, we think we're having a good meditation if we feel relaxed or peaceful, or if we see a light or whatever it might be. But true meditation is being fully present with whatever we're experiencing. I think a better word for transcendence would be transclusion. So I'm going to quote something which comes from philosopher Ken Wilber, which really grounds this and makes it really clear, which is the subject of the previous stage becomes the object of the second. So the way I'll explain this is, in meditation, or should I say normally, I might be having a thought or a belief or a sense of identity, of me-ness, and I'm identified with it very strongly as being, almost like it's like a physical object. It's real, it's real. I'm separate. But what happens in the meditative process is that we transclude. We don't transcend, we transclude it. So it's kind of like, now I'm looking at that thought in my hand, and I realize that there is an observer of the thought. So now what was previously experienced as the subject now becomes the object. It's the object in my hand, which I'm now observing. And this can happen in meditation with thoughts, feelings, even beliefs, and even our sense of a separate self or our identity. Even that we can transclude. The reason why I'm saying transclude rather than transcend is because we may sometimes think that what we've done is that thought no longer exists, or that feeling, and we push it out, and that's actually unhealthy. For example, if there's a strong emotion, it's better to be aware of it and to integrate it, because it holds a lot of energy, holds a lot of wisdom. And so, true meditation is about integration, not suppression and denial. And that's one of the ways that people get stuck in meditation, or their progress starts to become limited. So we'll cover that more later anyway. So another aspect of meditation is meta consciousness. This means normally we're in default mode. We just think and our thoughts just run automatically. We just have reactions and feelings to certain things, or we think the world is a certain way. But in meta consciousness, meditation helps us to, again, similar to what we just said there, it's very similar. It's like stand back and observe something, to get a sense of detachment and to think about thinking rather than just the thoughts just running the show. We now stand back and realize that we are the experiencer, that is thinking the thoughts. It's not that I think, therefore I am. It's I am. I am comes first. I am, and then there's thoughts. And so it gives us that ability to stand back, to detach. And what that does, it brings us into a space of possibility. It means that we don't have to be stuck in the past, or we don't have to believe something. That belief may seem like it couldn't be any other way. It feels physical and strong. But once we move out of default mode and we observe with detachment, with less judgment, then it creates, we move into the realization of space in which thoughts and feelings, beliefs, and even identity are arising. That means more possibility and more freedom. So what are the benefits of meditation? Well, let's be honest, we're human. We often start for personal reasons. We start for personal benefit. And that's absolutely fine, because we have all of these different, we move through different stages of consciousness within our own being as we've grown up and matured. And that process goes on. You don't just get to 30 or 40, 50 years old and you've completely matured. It keeps on going. And often when we start meditation, we're curious, or we do it because, maybe I'll be more relaxed, or I'll be able to focus better, optimize my performance, stress relief, mental and physical health, releasing negative emotion. And these are all valid things. And that's where it starts. What happens in the process of meditation, or the journey, is that we also start to experience those things, the kind of the benefits, but we also start to, if we don't start off going into this practice for want of a better word, for kind of, I don't want to make it sound judgmental, but like kind of higher motives or spiritual motives. If we don't start off there, what often happens is that starts to naturally occur at some point in the process. It's like we clear a lot of things, and a lot of healing happens, and then we move into a more spiritual kind of realization. It starts to flower and open up to us. The similar thing, interestingly, happens in CE5. In CE5, I've noticed that we may start off curious. Are there other people out there? Can I make contact? I've met people, for example, that have literally told me that they've got Dr. Greer's app and they've sat down, followed the instructions on the app, and boom, they've had a sighting. I mean, some of these people have told me that it wasn't like some of us purist types or new age types that think it's got to be a certain way. We're going to go on a vegan diet for the next 3 weeks and purify ourselves, and then we'll make contact. I mean, I've heard of for example, some guys getting together with the app and having a beer, and they're having an experience. And there were some people that contacted me like that, and they had some experiences, and then they felt like that it wasn't. Then they felt like there was a block, like, why is it not still happening? And what I explained to them was that you had something I would call, on one level, beginner's luck. That's a real phenomenon that occurs in all areas of life, including CE5. It's actually been studied by researchers, have actually studied beginner's luck. It's considered to be a real phenomenon. But it occurs in CE5 as well. And I think there's other ways to think about this. For example, in CE5, it's like, well, they may know that if you're not kind of into this stuff already, but you're kind of wanting to find out, then where a lot of people are at that point is that they do want to see something. They want the eye candy, as I call it. They need a visual. They may not have opened up the senses to be able to perceive subtle phenomena. So that's why that may often happen at the beginning. And so people will go for a similar process with CE5. They'll start off with certain intentions and they're in a certain place with it, and then they're kind of moving through it. And that's absolutely fine. That is the process. And we see the same thing happens in CE5 that we will see across the board with all kind of meditative and spiritual personal development. We'll see this, and we'll get onto that later. We're actually going to go into the states and stages of consciousness that human beings move through. And so when we do C5, we will go through the same states of consciousness and the same stages of consciousness. We're actually growing and maturing and evolving through this practice. So the other aspect is interpersonal. There are interpersonal benefits to meditation. An interesting thing is that there's this idea of mirror neurons in the brain. It's like neurons specifically inside our brain that are there to, when someone else is having a particular experience, these neurons imagine what it's like for that person having that experience. It helps us to empathize. And we know, for example, the therapists that meditate, they often get, in studies, shows that they get more results with their clients. It's almost like sitting with the client, because the therapist practices meditation and mindfulness as in a meditative or mindful state, that when the client is sharing difficult material, even if the client doesn't practice meditation or mindfulness, the fact that the therapist does has a similar effect. Because this is the interesting thing. When you're in meditation, it's easy to understand if you close your eyes, and you can do this for a moment, and be aware of what you can maybe see in your mind. Maybe if you're having any thoughts or feelings, any sensations, and all these things are occurring to the mind. They're objects of consciousness, right? But if you open your eyes, it's the same thing. I can see cars there for the window moving past. I can hear those cars. I can hear the fan in the background. So there's visual, there's sounds, there's all these different things. And I might want to break it down into interior, exterior, but really it's still consciousness and experiencing all of that. And so when the therapist would sit with the client, the therapist is, even if they don't know everything that's going on with that other person, consciousness is perceiving all that. It's arising within consciousness, the same way that my internal experiences are arising within consciousness as external. And so it's the same thing. And so there are interpersonal benefits to meditation. It will have effects upon our relationships with people and our the way that we interact with people. More benefits of meditation include experiencing states of consciousness. We want to get into those kind of meditative states. We'll go into that more later. Stage development. Meditation has been shown to be the number one thing that actually matures a human being. It's not the only thing that does that, but it's the number one thing. Another aspect is shadow work. Now, that's an interesting, important thing, because shadow work is not necessarily done by people in personal development, in everyday life, or meditation. But it's important to do that, and we'll get on to that later. Also, the benefits for C5, of course, that's in a way this is why we're learning meditation in this specific context. I guess is there's going to be personal benefits. There's going to be all these other types of benefits, but there are benefits for C5. It's really important in C5 to expand consciousness. It's really important to have a flexible mind that can move into altered states of consciousness. And we're going to explore how to do that through understanding of states and brainwaves and the various techniques that we can use to get into different states. So this kind of mental energetic flexibility is really useful in C5. So we've covered what else? Growth. I mean, just our growth. You see, our growth individually and then together is not separate from our growth as a contact worker or the experiences that we're having with star people. It all goes together. We're working on ourselves individually, we're working as a team, and then we're working as a kind of like a bigger collective with the star people. One of the things as well is what people call CIDs. It used to be called ESP. They now call it Psi, which I like. Sounds really cool. PSI, Psi. It was called by some ancients, I think in the Vedas, they're called the CIDs. So these, in meditation traditions, when CIDs occur, normally the person is told to ignore it. They don't want to be distracted by it. But in CE5, we are actually open to practicing things like telepathy, remote viewing, and out-of-body experience. These are part of the landscape of CE5. They enable us to make contact. These are ways to make contact. These are ways to interact and to communicate with star people. And I think one of the things about CIDs is in some meditation traditions, they're aiming at what we call enlightenment. And the CIDs are if they arise, fine, but don't get too obsessed by them. But hey, I think things have changed, and it's not like we belong to a particular wisdom tradition or a particular religion or path. It's all different stuff, you know. And the thing about CIDs or these abilities, are that it's, yes, in the wrong hands, these things can become obsessive. I had a contact worker once that was obsessed by telekinesis. He wanted to be able to move things with his mind and catch things on fire. And I'm like, well, but what's the intention for that? What is the reason? And we might think there's a good reason for that. Well, because it would be really cool, or it would really open my mind to the possibilities. All I would say is maybe, but what is the usefulness of that, or the function of it? And in the context of CE5, let's spend our energy on developing those CIDs, abilities that are going to be helpful, because we don't have unlimited energy resources here to practice all these things. So, for example, in our group at the moment, we are going to be looking at remote viewing and telepathy, but really start with telepathy because in some ways it's the easiest and it's the most kind of relevant to CE5, because when we connect with the ETs, with their craft or environment, but we're also always connecting with their consciousness. So for me, that is what I call telepathy or telempathy, which means it's a communication through the heart. So that's why I would say that would be the number one ability to practice, to develop. And the other great thing about meditation is that it can help us with fear and anxiety. Again, it's this being aware of anxieties. What we tend to do is block a lot of things out. But in meditation and mindfulness, we can become aware and we can release things. We can, again, not transcend it, but transclude it, because any emotion or difficult thing that we're experiencing, it is burning a lot of energy. It's wasting a lot of energy. For example, if there's a fear or anxiety or an incorrect belief, they're burning a lot of energy, wasting energy. If you push it out, however, you lose the energy. So if you become aware of it and you integrate it, what happens is all of the energy that was being wasted on that anxiety, that fear, or that incorrect belief is reintegrated back into your beingness. You get all that energy back. So from that, you get more energy. There's more peacefulness afterwards. There's more expansion of consciousness. These are almost like bits of ourself that are kind of, and the shamans have this idea of like parts of us that would be hiding under a rock. They would take you on a journey and you would you would basically go into the underworld and you would go looking for a part of yourself. And they believe the soul was almost like a round spherical crystal. Little bits would get chipped off through the years through trauma or fear or anxiety. But we could locate those parts again and dialogue with them and bring them back in. And that seems quite mystical or magical. But actually, we now today have a very scientific understanding of that process. These are real things. It's just that people have explained them in different ways or have different practices to achieve these things. So I now want to share with you what I call the map of consciousness. Now, I was speaking to someone getting into contact work recently. We had a conversation and we chatted on the phone for a very long time, and they were pretty much going, yeah, that happens to me too. Now that makes sense. That makes sense. By the time we got to the end of the call, they were like, wow, I feel like kind of, what they said was they realized in speaking to me about these things that they had a confirmation that they weren't going crazy, but they were experiencing things that other people are experiencing. And there's names for these things. There's a map of this reality. So that's the reason why a map can be helpful. It can allay some anxiety. It's also psychoactive. By knowing the map, knowing what is out there, what happens is that we actually become more aware of what is out there or within us. It's that it's already there, and it's already there in our subconscious or in our higher conscious. I'm gonna have some water a moment. But it's like we don't have anywhere to put these things, especially in our modern culture, where today contact with star people, the afterlife, or whatever it might be, these things are not as normal as they were in ancient times. They were normalized. Then we had science and reason and rationality, and then suddenly these things became like they were superstitions, or they were just, that's the kind of the stupid people, the ancient ones that built the pyramids. They were really stupid and they believed in all sorts of rubbish, or the shamans believed in, they were just kind of running around, like they don't know anything, like they're primitive. And but now we're moving into this phase where these things are becoming pretty normal again. And this is the point throughout our history, geographically through time. These altered states of consciousness, these states of consciousness and these experiences and these communications have actually been around for a long time. They're basically normal. So when we live in a world where suddenly we're told that they're not normal, it causes anxiety and confusion. And this is where the map comes in, because now you're like, okay, I'm not the only one, but there's also a map. Of course, there's a map, because these things have been around for a long time. I do want to say, though, before we share the map, that the map is not the territory. So don't confuse the map for the territory. We don't want to turn this into some kind of religious thing or to some kind of prescriptive thing. Everyone's experience of the territory as well is very different. There's hundreds of types of meditation. So although we're going to look at the basic states of consciousness, depending upon the person, for example, Tibetan Buddhist monks have broken it down to 36 types of states of consciousness, like fine gradations, whereas generally worldwide, there's 4 main states of consciousness that we can all refer to. But some cultures have so much experience that they've been able to go into in much more fine detail. And also with each meditation practice, your experience of what we'd call higher consciousness could be very different. There's such a spectrum. So the map is useful, but it's not the territory, but it does help you to navigate. So what I'm going to share with you is actually based in the work of philosopher Ken Wilber. And I don't want to go into too many fine details on this. It can get a bit complicated and a bit intellectual. So I'm going to give a rough outline. And then I'm going to recommend to do your own research and look into this more. Basically, when Ken Wilber was 19 years old, he was studying transpersonal psychology. And he said to his teacher one day, he said, "Sir," he said, "when are we going to kind of come up with a theory of everything?" And his teacher said, "We're not studying everything. We're doing transpersonal psychology." And Ken Wilber was I don't know, destined to find out, to kind of, he wanted to see how the whole jigsaw puzzle came together. And so he went off around the world, and he was looking into everything, science, biology, psychology, and meditation traditions. And he was meeting all these different spiritual teachers, all different wisdom traditions all around the world. And he started to look for commonalities and patterns. And he started to find that there are universalities. There's all these different beliefs and different systems and different meditation techniques. And then we have biology, subjective, like the mind, emotion, philosophy. We have all these different viewpoints in the world. But his belief was that, well, does it all somehow come together? And so he's written a book called The Theory of Everything, which basically goes into that. And the way to describe his work is that he's basically looked for a map. But when I say him, it's not just him. The map that he's created is being in concert with other experts, primarily a lot of developmental psychologists. And so they've mapped out all sorts of things. And this is what we're going to look at today. We're going to actually have a map for what it means to be, in many ways, what it means to be human, and a map of consciousness and reality, which is going to be really, really, I think, really helpful as you practice meditation and practice CE5. So, yeah. So the first thing that we want to look at here is states of consciousness. So do forgive me. I'm getting a bit confused with the whole technology a minute. So I've sent an image through to James, but I don't know how this. A little bit lost on this bit. I think the image is going to come up on the screen, or it should come up on the screen, but I won't know. Right. Okay, I can see it. Great. Yeah. So, yeah, if we look in the middle of this image, we can see that we have what I'm referring to as the gross consciousness. So, gross consciousness is, okay, my eyes are open. But have you ever had the experience, for example, of feeling really connected to nature? Or maybe in a social situation, maybe even feeling of oneness, or you're having the runner's high. And these are what we would call gross experiences of unity consciousness. So that's the gross consciousness, but the gross consciousness is also a body. Gross meaning physical body. If you look in top right on this image, we have body. So body. Now, if we move along to the next part of the sphere, we have subtle. Subtle is, for example, our sense of energy. We close our eyes and maybe visualize, or our imagination. Or, for example, we're practicing working with the energy parts of our energetic system, like chakras or meridians. And this is the subtle realm. This is often where we may have an experience in meditation of an experience of light, seeing light, or maybe an interaction with some kind of what appears to be a being. This often occurs in the subtle realm. And then finally, we have the causal. So the way you understand this is causal is like the beginning. This is spirit. This is pure spirit before even matter existed. It's like it was just completely dark and empty, and like it says in Genesis, then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So the light The first bit of light is crossing that border between the causal to the subtle, and right on the edge there would be the purest light. Let there be light. That's the purest light. Causal is a state of consciousness where it's just kind of what some people describe as like an emptiness or an infinite expanse, just like pure space. Or some people may experience it as if it's a nothingness. Before the subtle realm, before there's light, which is a somethingness. So those are the three main states of consciousness. So we have gross, subtle, and causal. Now, believe it or not, we can experience those. We don't have to be advanced meditators or CE5ers. We've all probably experienced some of those states of consciousness in our lifetime, whether we meditate or not. Finally, if you look at the line coming here, the arrow coming out through gross, subtle, and causal, it says non-dual, which means not two. This is another term for oneness. And if you look top right, we have mind, or body, mind, and soul. We've all heard that phrase, right? So this is what we call the triune being. And basically, non-dual, which means not two or oneness, is gross, subtle, and causal consciousness all arising at the same time or being experienced at the same time. In other words, you can have a gross oneness experience, a subtle unity experience, a causal unity experience, and you can also have a non-dual consciousness, which is all of it simultaneously. And that's, so if we think of the mind, body, and soul, it's, human beings, we're a mind, a body, and a soul. We're all three. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Your body, we know that we feed our bodies, and or drink water, you know? Or I drink a lot of water. So our bodies need sustenance. It needs exercise. But guess what? Think of Russian dolls. The mind needs sustenance too. The mind needs exercise. And we all know that. I'm not going to go into too much detail. We all know that's true, right? The mind, you exercise the mind as much as the body. You feed the mind just as much as the body. Finally, the soul needs exercise, sustenance. And so to be a complete human being, to be an integrated human being, to be full spectrum consciousness, it's ultimately moving towards this non-dual state of consciousness, oneness, where it's gross, subtle, causal, mind, body, soul, all as one. And we're experiencing, it seems like we're experiencing more of reality, but in fact, we're experiencing more of what we are. Because all of this reality, this consciousness that we're experiencing is us. I have a body, but I'm not my body. Well, that's only half true. The body is also, this body is appearing within infinite consciousness. This person called Jane is appearing in infinite consciousness. So that's states of consciousness. Now, the cool thing is, we're already experiencing those. Maybe we don't realize it. We're experiencing them all the time through making love. People have experienced it through drugs or psychedelics. People experience it through meditation. People experience it through exercise, just going out in nature. We have these experiences. What we do in meditation is we train ourselves to spend more time in them. And when we spend more time in these states of consciousness, they become more of our normal experience. And also being in these states begins to change us in some sense. So we have these 3 or 4 states of consciousness, but they're also bodies. And then we also have stages of consciousness. Stages of consciousness. And this is So think of states as being like a vertical line, and then stages as being like a horizontal line. Okay, sorry, wrong way round. Forgive me. States horizontal, stages vertical. So like an equal arm cross. Now, states of consciousness are ever present and free. We can dip into those states anytime we like. It doesn't take like years to get into those states. We can drop into non-duality oneness like that. Even if you've never meditated before, you can experience that rapidly, and some people can experience it straight away. We can move in and out of those from one to the other, back and forth. They're all freely available. The stages are different. They go upwards. They're vertical. And the difference with stages is that in stages, you can't skip stages. You have to get to the first stage before you can get to the second stage, and the second to the third, and so forth. And so one of the things that we know as well about human beings is that we move into higher stages of consciousness. Now, the interesting thing about stages of consciousness is that stages of consciousness can be developed through, the number one thing is meditation. Simply by being in these states of consciousness, by spending more time in these deeper states of consciousness, we actually grow. It makes us grow. We start to evolve quicker. And it's occurring to me now, so I'm going to say this. You might be thinking, why has this got to do with CE5? You're going to start to see how this connects with CE5 in a moment. So I don't know if James is on the other end, if you can put up the slide of stages of consciousness. So I think we've got a different one. We've got quadrants, I think. Okay, so I know what's happened with the slide, so I'm just going to carry on. Hopefully this will make sense, even though you may not be able to see the slide. So in stages of consciousness, this is going to be quite difficult without the image. So stages are sequential, and we have, so in our history, we would have, a long time ago, we would have had, at some point in our history, we would have been egocentric beings. Okay, egocentric beings. And then we moved into higher stages of consciousness. We moved into, we became like ethnocentric. So it's kind of like about your tribe or your religion. It's like my way or the highway. And then we move into where we are today. We're world-centric, more of a kind of a global mind. Now, we know from developmental psychology that most people are still at what's called the amber stage of consciousness. 70% of the population on the planet are basically tribal fundamentalist or traditionalist. And this was the stage that we often associate with religion and my tribe, your tribe, my way or the highway, which was before orange, which is what we'd think of as science and reason and rationality. And this is why sometimes you see people like, oh, if we got rid of all religion or et cetera, the world would be fixed. But that's the problem. The problem with that is that's not the way that stages of consciousness occur. When you grow, when we as a species have gone from egocentric, the lower stages of consciousness, up to higher stages of consciousness, we didn't get rid of the lower stages. They are building blocks. We cannot get to a higher stage of consciousness without the lower stages of consciousness. So it's that approach is not going to work. And what the research shows is that when society hits 10% of these higher stages of consciousness, it's not like everyone hits a higher stage of consciousness. When we hit 10%, it somehow affects everyone else. Some people call this like the 1% or the 100th monkey effect. So other people will start to more likely to be open to the kind of thinking that goes with this higher stage of consciousness, but they won't be at that stage of consciousness. So we're moving into what's called green or pluralistic mind, or planetary mind. That's where we are at the moment. But in the last estimation of this, I think we're at about 6% teal or integral, which is the next stage of consciousness. So up until a certain point, I can't remember exactly when it was, but up to a certain point, I think it was about 30 years ago, developmental psychologists noticed a new stage of consciousness appearing in human beings. In this stage of consciousness, they all call it generally the same word, integrated or integral or holistic. And it's where the person starts to not see the world as that's each stage of consciousness it would be a higher stage of consciousness, but it wanted to kind of get rid of the previous one. But integral is the first time when there are human beings that realize that's not how it works. The way forward is integration. And so this occurs, we've got the image on the screen, brilliant. And so this occurs when we hit integral. The good news is we're about halfway there. Do you remember back in 2012 when they said, oh, this big event might happen, we might all go up into the stars and ascend to another dimension or all this kind of stuff? And I was warning people, no, that's not what's going to happen. But Ken Wilber did point out that something interesting did happen on 2012. They saw one of the biggest shifts towards integral that they'd seen in recent history. So we're moving to a very special point in our history in terms of human development and as a species. Now, this is how big this is, because up until this stage of consciousness, every stage of consciousness wanted to get rid of the previous stage of consciousness. It thought it was better. Rationality, reason, scientific consciousness thought it was better than religion. Green consciousness wanted to get rid of religion and orange. And we're seeing lots of kind of confusion. And if you look at the way the world is at the moment, with very strong, for want of a better word, liberal politics and green consciousness, it's starting to kind of not make much sense. It's starting to kind of fall apart. And this is what we think of as the shadow of the leading edge of consciousness. At some point, it will display its shadow, and then it has to move towards integration before we move into the next stage. So in a sense, what's happening in the world, as confusing as it can be sometimes, and as difficult and challenging as it's become, it's the birth pains, in a sense, of the next stage of consciousness. And integral consciousness, developmental psychologists decided to call it second tier to differentiate it from all of the previous stages of consciousness. Because, like I said, it's the first stage of consciousness that doesn't want to get rid of the older stages of consciousness. Now, in meditation, I've had the experience, you can actually almost like experience these other stages of consciousness within yourself and realize I'm still egoic. like that I'm still egocentric is inside me, ethnocentric, world-centric, and then global and cosmocentric. And then when we think about CE5, as you can see on this diagram here that I made for you, and thank you to James for I did this by hand, and then James did the fancy stuff on the computer. I'm hopeless with that stuff. But you can see here we're moving from ethnocentric, egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric, planetary, paradigmatic, where we're kind of like starting to kind of, people are starting to see that it's not like how everything is interrelated, and then moving up to the trans global and the intuitive meta mind, the overmind. And when we start to get in this territory, which we are moving in that direction, this is where we move into cosmocentric. Cosmocentric is where we become to realize ourselves as cosmic humans, spiritual beings, and one with the universe. It is the consciousness of oneness with the universe. When we do C5 and we sit under the stars and we look up and we feel that sense of oceanic oneness, that's because it is. That's because this is part of us. And what's happening is, as we're evolving into higher states of consciousness, we're coming to realize that the I, as spirit, is not just that body there walking on the planet. It is consciousness that is everywhere all at once. It's like your mind is expanding outwards through into higher levels. So that's stages of consciousness, and I hope you can see the relevance there to C5. And as you develop yourself through a spiritual practice and meditation, you will start to move more quickly into higher stages. So you will mature and grow as a human being. Okay. So the next slide, if James can move that along for us, which is the quadrants. So in the quadrants, this can really get a bit complex. So I'm going to make it really simple. So basically, there is I as an individual, there's you, there's we, and there's it. It's like, I have a body, but I am not my body. Well, because I'm the consciousness that's experiencing the body. Now, that's how some people experience in meditation, that it's, oh, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my body. But I would say that's the first stage of meditation. The second stage is actually to transclude and to realize that, wait a minute, I get to this realization. The first stage is that, yeah, I'm not 100% identified with any particular thought, feeling, belief, or experience, but every thought, feeling, experience, sound, whatever it might be, is being experienced by the infinite consciousness. And not just by the infinite consciousness, everything is actually made of the same substance as infinite consciousness, as oneness. So in other words, every thought, every feeling, every sound, these are vibrations, right, coming in from my ears, but they're vibrations inside being registered. I close my eyes, I'm experiencing stuff inside, but there's no, this whole thing of like inside and outside kind of breaks down in the sense that it's all arising in consciousness. It's all me. Now, in the next image that James has put up for us, here's how this is demonstrated in what's called integral theory, which is we've got the collective and the individual, and then we have the interior and the exterior. So we have the I space, top left, emotion, thought, mind, altered states of consciousness, meditation. We can have an experience with star people with our eyes closed in meditation, for example. That could be in the I space. That's interior and it's individual. But if we come to the bottom left quadrant, we have we space. We space. I'm sat here in my chair, but we're also here on the internet. There's some kind of connection going on. There's this we space, right? This is relationship culture. And this is interior as well. It's a collective interior. We share a collective interior through relationship culture. And when we do C5, what's really interesting is that the I space and the we space come together. For example, a person could be having an experience with their eyes closed in meditation. Other people in the group having an experience. They share and they find out that they're having what appears to be the same or very similar experience. And even when we go into meditation, we imagine ourselves going into a space together, or if it's in real life, we sit there and we hold hands, and we're physically together, present. But if, for example, we do a meditation online, we'd imagine we were there holding hands together in a virtual space or an astral space. So the I and the we, they come together on the interior, as we can see. Then we have the exterior, the it space, top right. Individual exterior means your body energy, the organism. And I'd just like to point out, coming back to stages of consciousness, because it might seem a bit kind of hierarchical. People in our culture today often get upset with the idea of hierarchy. But if we mustn't throw the baby out with the bathwater and ignore science and rationality, because if we think about it, hierarchy exists. It exists in nature. We have the subatomic particles, whatever, like atoms, cells, organs, brainstem, brain, and then the whole person. There is a hierarchy you can see within our own bodies and in nature. There's a hierarchy out there in nature. There's a hierarchy out in the universe. But there's two different kinds of hierarchy. The hierarchy that people get upset with in our modern world is the hierarchy where it's people lording it up over other people or controlling other people, or stuff around hierarchies apparently that are involving maybe men or whatever it might be, or religious hierarchy. So people have an issue with hierarchies in that sense. But it's like, don't completely ignore hierarchy, because it's there inside of us in the way that our bodies grow and everything in nature grows. It's a natural thing. Again, we don't want to transcend hierarchy, we transclude it. Hierarchy is something we can't get away from, and it's not bad. It's we just need to understand what it really is and what it really means. So on the bottom right there, we've got the collective exterior, the it space. That's like systems, the environment, technology. So it's the collective it space. So this is where it gets really cool, because we can actually see that reality is all four of these happening at the same time. How do we tie this in with consciousness and CE5? Well, I explain it as this. I, looking out, you, but then from your perspective, you're I, and I become you. So I and you are interchangeable. Then we have we, social realm where we interact, and then we have it, what we think of as the physical objects. What all of these four different things that are occurring in our experience, they are all occurring in oneness. They are all consciousness appearing in different forms. Consciousness has an inside and outside, a collective and individual, an I, a you, a we, and an it. And this is something that we experience through CE5, because we experience the I space, the we space. And one of the things that star people have said, not only to myself, but many people, you can see this in the literature or speak to other people that have had contact experiences or people that do contact work. And the same kind of message keeps coming along from the ETs. They say things like, you're one of us. One group of ETs said to me back in 2009, they said, when I asked them, where do you come from? They said, we are your future. Now, these sound like different things, but they're the message that seems to be coming across is that we are somehow related or family. So we start to think of it in I suppose, upper right exterior terms. Oh, maybe we're related by as an organism through DNA. That's one way we could be related. But we're also related top left. If we look top left of the quadrants here, top left, we're related in the interior. And this is why you'll hear people like Dr. Greer say that consciousness, oneness, this is the main way that we make contact. This is how we realize it, through consciousness. And yeah, there may be connections in other senses. And when we do C5, we're actually experiencing contact from the I space, mind to mind, oneness. The we space is where we can actually learn from them about we can have a relationship with them. We can learn about their culture and they can learn from us. This is something that is actually talked about and reported, and I have had experiences in that too. We can actually learn from each other and share our cultures. And when we do this, we expand consciousness. Another example, top right, exterior, individual, behavior, body, energy, organism. We can interact with a star being and we can feel our third eye activated, our psychic abilities, our energy moving through our bodies. We can experience changes that feel more physical within us. And so that's true. People report healing. So we can see from these quadrants, and we apply it to CE5, that all of these things are happening, and it helps us start to understand what's happening and realize that it's all just different forms of consciousness. Another thing in the integral model of consciousness and reality and human development is what we call lines of development. So lines of development is being strong in one area, maybe being weaker in another area. And how this is relevant to C5 is that we are, through the process, we're working on ourselves in different ways. We're working on our interior, our emotions. We're working on our consciousness development. We're working on our ability to communicate with each other as a group, but also with the star people. There's all sorts of things that we're working on. We've got all different gifts and talents and abilities that we have. Now, we all have strengths and weaknesses, but as a group, we all come together in C5, and we all have different strengths and weaknesses, and we can make things happen. It's like, think of us as a group as being neurons within a brain or cells within a greater being. Together, we can do anything. And for example, these graphics on here, James did that. I didn't do that. I gave him the ideas, but he did that bit for me. I would have taken forever to do that. So it just goes to show what we can achieve when we come together, like that practically, but also in terms of consciousness. That's actually what we're doing. Even when it looks like it's a very practical thing, like James doing that on my behalf, it's actually consciousness, because it started in the mind, the idea, then it was drawn, and then it was kind of projected outwards, and then it was shared in the we space. This is just consciousness changing form and moving through space and time. It's literally what all of this is. Anyway, so James, if you want to move on to the brainwaves. Brainwaves, I love brainwaves. I'm a bit of a geek, so yeah, we got to go into brainwaves. And of course, brainwaves are something that we hear a lot about, and they're helpful to have some understanding of them in meditation. So if you want to get that slide up, James. So I'll start with brainwaves. It's basically the electrical activity in our brain, right? And of course, at some point in history, we were able to measure these brainwaves, and the technology has got better, so we can see more and more and more of what's going on in people's consciousness on that kind of gross level. But researchers have looked at the connection between the electrical activity and the states of consciousness, and other things as well. So we basically have like the everyday. Thank you, James. There it is. So if you go to the second one down, we have beta waves. That's your normal thinking consciousness, like alertness, focus, thinking, excitement, or stress. If you have too much beta, you can get stressed. And then if you look on the right side of that, it shows us how we can get those brainwaves: thinking, talking, writing, conceptualization, memory. So let's relate that to C5. When people are doing C5 and meditating, it is really helpful to, at the end, all share your experiences and to keep notes. Because what happens is when you go into meditation, you sometimes lose the beta activity, which means you can come out and you go, oh, something happened, but I can't remember it. you're effectively training your memory muscles when in an altered state. And if you're especially new to meditation and deeper states, it means that you need to train the muscle to get the information through from a deeper state of consciousness up to the conscious level. So when we do CE5, we will say, after a meditation, to go around the circle and share your experience. And that's really helpful because you will train your ability to remember. So what else have we got? If we go down to alpha waves, 8 to 12 hertz is kind of more relaxed, related to meditation, being in the now, being present, calmness, learning. Now, I want to, you'll be pleased to hear, give you a quick exercise, or a couple, well, we'll blend two exercises together actually, so we can experience alpha wave activity in the brain. Now, to generate alpha activity in the brain, it's actually quite easy. You just close your eyes and your brain will start to generate alpha activity. But we are going to basically take that a few steps further. So what I want you to do is, I just want you to close your eyes, take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Just let go with each breath. And I want you to take a deep breath in and imagine rolling your eyes up. So you're looking upwards or rolling your eyes up to the top of your head. And then as you breathe out, look down towards the ground. And then breathe in and roll your eyes up. And then down towards the ground as you breathe out. And one more time, breathing in and breathing the eyes up. So roll your eyes up. And then just let your eyes relax. And then become aware of space. Become aware of space between your eyes. The space from your eyes to your nose. The space on the inside of your body. Imagine that the inside of your body is hollow and you're full of space. As you imagine that space inside your being, imagine looking into your own chest inside yourself. And it's like looking into the sky or looking up at the stars at night into deep space. You're just full of space inside. And as you become aware of the space within, become aware of the space outside. Full of space, surrounded by space. And you know as well, don't you, that you're mostly composed of space. If you go down into the atoms, there's a space between atoms and there's a space inside, and it's mostly 99.9999% space. Just focus on the space. And when you're ready to come back, just slowly open your eyes. Excellent. So that was a very quick, it's not a meditation practice I would do every day as such. It's like just some kind of different things there to kind of demonstrate some things. So when we move the eyes up and down, it activates alpha waves. We all have the experience. We all know that if we look up at the stars, we feel kind of different, or we roll our eyes up, or when people are happy, they look up. When they're sad or thinking a lot, they tend to look down. So we know as well, when I do hypnosis with people, I'm a hypnotherapist. You ask people, one way to activate these brain rhythms is to ask people to look up at your finger or look up at the ceiling and then close the eyes. And then that looking upwards activates alpha waves. And when I was young and I started meditating at 7 years old. And one of the techniques that I would use was to roll my eyes up and to look just there. It felt as if I was rolling my eyes back and felt as if I was looking inside my own brain. And I became aware of a sensation there, and a blue light would start to appear in my mind. I used to call it the blue pearl. And it would start to appear, and I would go into this deeper state. And I became aware that there was something inside my brain that would start to buzz. I didn't know at the time, but there was an Indian family that I came across, and I noticed that they were wearing bindis. And I still didn't really know then, but I started to make these connections over the years. And eventually I found out about what you call the third eye, or the pineal gland. And so this is one technique you can actually do. You can roll your eyes up, imagine you're looking there, imagine you're looking inside, looking at a point between your brows. You might even want to imagine an eye, and you focus on it. That's a meditation technique that you may want to explore. And that brings us down to theta, the next one down, 3 to 8 hertz. Well, I think it's 3 to 8 hertz. That'll do. So theta, 3 to 8 hertz. And if you meditate on the third eye, you may, it's a good way to experience more theta activity. And that thing I call the blue pearl, I was experiencing this very young, but it turns out when I got older and I was doing more research and I was coming across different traditions and practices, that seeing a blue light when you're in meditation is actually is a well-known thing. It occurs to lots of people. And it's an indication that you're moving into theta activity of your brain. Now, the funny thing about our minds is that we can I call it reverse engineer. We can trigger, rather than waiting for the blue light to appear to get into theta, we can imagine a blue light, and that can get us into that state quicker. So theta activity is associated with deep meditation. It's hypnotic, vivid imagery, intuition, psychic abilities, and to some extent healing. And also I associate blissfulness with theta. And the ways that we can access it is through visualization, deep meditation, hypnosis, imagining doors, stairs, and going inwards. Again, there are certain things that we can imagine, like going for a door, going downstairs, that feeling of going down, or going inwards inside our own body, that can activate theta activity in our brain. So there are shortcuts. There's almost like switches that we can switch on in our brains and our bodies, that we can activate these states at will. So on that note, I have a quick meditation for you there to experience theta. I want to kind of combine a heart math, what's called heart math. So put a hand onto your heart. Take a deep breath and feel your heart beat. Just feel your heart beating. Focus on your heartbeat and your breath. And then begin to imagine or think about someone or something that brings you to a state of gratitude, appreciation, or love. Let a little smile come to your face. Imagine a light in your heart, and this light is growing stronger with each breath and with each beat of your heart. Now imagine you're going inwards into your own heart space. It's like you're floating inside yourself. It's like you're hollow on the inside. You move inside yourself deeper and deeper until you come upon a door. You walk up to the door, you turn the handle, and you walk inside. And as you go through this door, you go deeper inside yourself, inside your heart. And then you come to another door, and you open it, and you walk inside. And you go deeper again inside yourself. Then you come across a third door, and you open it, and you go inside, and you go even deeper inside yourself. And then you come to a set of stairs, and each step guides you deeper down inside yourself. So take the first step down and go deeper inside. And the next step, go deeper down. And just imagine in a way that works for you that you're really walking down these steps and get that sense of moving downwards. Go deeper with each step, all the way down. And it's like the steps go down from your heart, down through your belly. Down to the bottom of your spine and down through your feet. Each step takes you down, down, down. And then just become aware of your feet. And imagine energy coming from your feet floating down into the earth. And this energy, or these roots, like you're a tree, these roots come from your feet down into the soil, down into rocks and crystals, down to the center of the earth. And just wrap those roots around the center of the earth. And breathe that energy from the center of the earth all the way up into your feet and all the way up into your body, up into your heart space. And imagine yourself coming all the way back up those steps and back through those doors. The third door, closing it behind. The second door, closing it behind you. The first door, closing it behind you. And all the way back out to your physical body, sat here. And just bring yourself all the way back. And so that's just a quick exercise of using our heart. And as you can see in that example, we had 3 doors, and then we go down the steps, and we're imagining it's going down from our body, and then we're going down into the earth. And so anything to do with doors, steps, going inside and downwards, such as going down into the earth, that activates theta activity. So that's a way you can actually, switch that activity on. You can actually, there are many ways to do this, to achieve this. We don't have to sit in deep meditation and get into these states. Mastery is to have some knowledge of these things, to have a map of consciousness, and then you can actually choose how to move into different states. And when you start to do this and you explore it, what happens is you don't necessarily need a technique anymore. You can just remember what it's like to be in alpha brainwave activity, or what it's like to be in theta activity, or what it's like to be in slower activity like delta. So the next one, as I say, is delta, and that's much, much slower. It only normally happens when we're asleep, in deep dreamless sleep, but experienced meditators can get into delta. And experienced meditators can do that. It can take a while. There are ways that we can achieve that. For example, we can meditate early in the morning because our brain's already the electrical activity is already very slow. And of course, before bedtime. Now, there is actually a practice of meditating through the night, or meditating really late at night, which can get you into some really deep states of consciousness. This is where people do start to get into really deep theta and delta, even if they're not that experienced, because of course our brain is starting to get down into sleep. We're tired, we're falling asleep. So if we can actually meditate whilst late on the evening, but keep ourselves awake, it's like scuba diving. It's like going deep down, and you're scuba diving, you've got plenty of oxygen, you're going really, really deep to the bottom of the sea, but you're remaining conscious. That's one way to understand what meditation is. It's like scuba diving. And so, that's a way to experience delta. The other way to do this is we can, apart from just doing loads of meditation, we can also use some technology to do that. Such as brainwave entrainment, using sound technology to achieve this. And we will get onto that in a moment. So don't worry, if you're brand new to meditation, or you've been doing this for a while and you just want to get deeper and you want to be able to get into all these states of consciousness, you can do all of that. And with the modern technology and what we know today, we can do this a lot quicker than we used to do it. Right there at the bottom, we've got infra-low frequencies, which we didn't know that they existed up until a certain point in history because we couldn't measure them. So there's little known about them. We can now measure epsilon, which is below delta, and that's very hard to get to that state. Normally, naturally, it would take a yogi about 15 years of a lot of practice. The only way for us householders to get to that level of meditation would be through entrainment, which we'll get on into in a moment. So yeah, it would literally take us forever, but we can actually experience that rapidly with the use of technology. So yeah, some of you might be glad to hear that. That was kind of partly why I put this on, to show that meditation it's actually much easier than we think. So what we know about meditation is what happens in the brain is we get these different brainwave activity. The brainwave activity, there is some correlation with the states, but it's not 100%. There is even a state of consciousness that some people get into, very, very deep meditation, where there's no recordable electrical activity in the brain. I don't know if that's because we just can't record it yet, but it seems to be that the brain can get to a point where it gets so slow that there may be, like, the brain's becoming like there's no activity in the brain, which is really interesting. But that's really super deep meditation. So I think we've covered, I am aware of time here. So we've covered, I think we did pretty well for that. We did cover it. So let's talk about how we bring all this together, because we've got these different, gamma, beta, alpha, theta, delta, different brainwave, and how we can move into different of these brainwaves. But the optimal frame of mind is what Anna Wise, and I recommend this book, Awakening the Mind by Anna Wise, A Guide to Mastering the Power of Your Brainwaves. She talks about that in there. And there's probably a bit of an older book. It's a bit of a classic, really, The Awakened Mind by C. Maxwell Cade. These are like biofeedback experts that went to India and they studied yogis and stuff, and they started to measure the brainwaves of everyday people too. And what they discovered was that there's a certain brain pattern called awakened mind. This comes normally with a lot of practice of meditation. And it's where our brain starts to work across the board. We have the beta, we have the alpha, we have the trancy theta, but we also have the sleepy delta. It's like we have access to a full spectrum of consciousness. And this is really important because, like I said earlier, when we're doing CE5, we can do deep meditation, but some people will fall asleep. I think some people think that meditation is sleep. But like I said earlier, what it really is the ability to scuba dive and stay conscious. And when we have all of these different electrical activity in our brain, we're across the spectrum, it means that there's a flow in both directions. We can receive things from the unconscious, which is delta. We can receive things from the subconscious, theta, like we can discover something about ourselves or understand something, and there can be a kind of some kind of healing. Or from delta, it can be like a deeper kind of healing process. But these things can come up. For example, when we're practicing remote viewing or telepathy, we are training to get into a deeper state, but also have some consciousness, some faster brain activity, so that we're able to bring that information back. And it's that practice of sharing your experience, taking notes. For example, when you meditate afterwards, because the kind of meditation that we do in CE5, normally when people meditate, it's just you meditate, you do Zen, you focus on your breath, and you just let it all go. But the kind of meditation that we often do in CE5, we also want to train that memory. So keep notes, meditate, and then write down what you experienced, and you'll find it easier and easier to bring all of that back, bring that information back, bring that communication that you've had with star people as well. You'll be able to literally, like a channel, bring it from to your conscious mind, and therefore be able to have a recollection, a memory, and be able to you'll be able to make use of what you're experiencing. So yeah, that's the awakened mind. Now, there are many different types of meditation. It's different for everyone. We've got meditating on the breath, or Zen. We've got mindfulness. We've got mantras. Now, mantras are really good because, especially if your mind is busy, you're repeating something which you're focusing on, giving your mind something to focus on, something to keep it amused, and then it calms the mind. And then afterwards, then you can sit in silence and be more receptive. So a mantra can be very, very helpful. It's a very good way to settle the mind and get focused. Sound, it's kind of related to mantra. We can use sound, singing bowls, music, brainwave entrainment. Breath, breathing, very important. Breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth a few times, just to kind of switch over from stress mode to relaxation mode. And it also helps to synchronize the brain. It's basically meditation. So here's an example. You can breathe in through one nostril and then cover the other one and breathe out the opposite way. And then you can breathe in through this nostril, cover it, and then breathe out for that nostril. And if you keep repeating that process, what you're doing is you're getting energy strongly into one side, because that will go, your eyes go contralateral to either side of your brain like that. But also you're sending the energy like that, and it's a very good practice to help to balance out the brain hemispheres and really helps to get focused. Anything to do with a lot of breathing, like strong breathing called pranayama, which you see in yoga, is a very good way to focus the brain. It's also a great way to get your brain, to get you into those very high frequencies like gamma, which are associated with bliss, and also higher consciousness. And obviously that comes in very helpful when we're doing CE5. Other practices are like working with the chakras, what we call cosmic orbits, like moving the energy around your body. Of course, we have the coherent thought sequence, which is really a meditation technique in itself that we use in CE5. That's like projecting yourself up, imagining the earth from space, and going all the way out up into deep space, and then all the way back, and showing star people where you're located. And that is a type of visualization meditation technique. And our ability to use other forms of meditation, for example, the mantra, the breathing, is really helpful to settle the mind first, so that then we're able to do the CTS. We want to have our mind settled first. So there are all these different types of meditation. Some people just like to use music. There's so many ways you can get into a flow state or a meditative state. Find your way. It doesn't matter what it is, but you need some way to do that. And obviously, when we're working together, because we're working as a team, and we want to do things together because we're a team, then obviously we wouldn't all necessarily be doing a completely different thing. We would do a shared meditation. But for example, in our CE5 groups, there will also be just quiet meditation. When you're doing quiet meditation, maybe at the beginning, it's just, okay, we're just going to sit here in silence, focus on the breath. Now, everyone in the group could be doing their own different type of meditation. They could come from any tradition, have any different practice, and there's many hundreds of different types of meditation technique. One person could have a mantra, one person could be doing Zen, focusing on the breath, whatever. But we're still doing it as a collective. Does that make sense? But then we also maybe have a guided meditation where we're all got the almost the exact same focus, and that brings all our energies together. Yeah, so many ways to access meditation, and let's have a quick look then at technology. So we talked about EEG, and so you can actually do neurofeedback, where you can actually put on a cap. Oh, I've got one here, like one of these. You put this on like that, and it's got a clip to go on the ear to measure your heartbeat, and then the front measures your brain. And you can use this, and it can train you in meditation. This one, about 100 quid. It's Mindwave Neurosky, I think it's Mindwave, and it will register your brain activity, and it will help you get into meditation. So there's one little gadget that can help us speed up the meditation. We can use, that's kind of like EEG. We can use EKG, which is measuring the heartbeat. So that has got that as well, with the heart, that measures, I think, your heartbeat through your ear. But I did have a heart math program that you would measure your heartbeat, and you could play a game where you're looking at the earth, and as you go into a state of consciousness where your heart is connected to your brain, and your heart is in a certain rhythm, which is called low heart rate variability. So your heart is relaxed and coherent. When you're looking at the earth, you're imagining light coming out of your heart. And as you become more coherent, it moves into kind of like through the rainbow. So as you go, so as you're kind of creating coherence, positivity, it's like you're sending healing to the earth. And that's a very powerful and wonderful piece of technology that you can use to increase your meditation progress. And there's many other different types of biofeedback as well. Another one is, I love this one, because I was diagnosed with ADHD, as some of you can probably tell, back in 2004, but I didn't take medication because of side effects, but I got one of these. It's basically a pair of glasses. And again, this is using light. You can also plug headphones in, and it uses light and sound to put your brain into different states of consciousness. It will literally change your brain activity. I'm just going to put it on a moment. You can see the colors on there flashing. It produces about 300 shades of color, and it will do everything from help you fall asleep to put you in a meditative state, to wake you up, like having a coffee. And it's absolutely wonderful. It's very powerful. 10 minutes on that will wake me up. And I've done CE5 on it, and I did actually have an incredible experience. Absolutely incredible experience when I used this on CE5. I also hypnotized someone once with this device, and they had an out-of-body experience. So it's a very powerful piece of kit. Really incredible stuff. I think we could do a whole workshop on that, to be honest. But it's again a quick way to get into meditation. And I wouldn't say, if you're going to be in a CE5, you wouldn't necessarily want to be on these all night, because and you can't be on this forever and ever, because it's powerful. You need to kind of do it in small doses. It's really like a way to kickstart your brain and get both sides of your brain synchronized, and then it prepares you for your meditation practice, or whatever that might be. That's the way that I use it. It's just a way to get into that, to help speed up the process and get into the zone. So there you go. The other technology is brainwave entrainment. So that's like the glasses there, but just using sound only. And they use frequencies to change the electrical activity in your brain, so that you can actually go into those different brain frequencies. And there have been different organizations have done this in the past, like HemiSync and HoloSync are the two well-known ones. And I've tried out lots of these, but I can tell you hands down that the most advanced, cutting edge, next generation is iOwake technology. And that's because they just started in like 2011, and within 2.5 months of using their technology, I came out of lifelong depression, and I also started to get on top of my ADHD big time. I mean, I spent 10 years out of work. I had a total turnaround using their sound wave technology, and also I experienced a spiritual awakening at the same time. I was experiencing things that even I hadn't experienced in a lifetime of meditation and spiritual practice. Their stuff is very, very powerful. So I highly recommend that. And again, it can get you into these brainwaves and these states more rapidly. Now, the great thing about this is you can use it as a tool. You don't want to be dependent on it. But if you don't know, maybe, or you don't feel confident with, say, getting into theta, you can put one of these tracks on, get into theta brainwaves, experience what it's like, and then by memory, by familiarity, you can sit in meditation and you can remember what it feels like and what it's like being in theta. Maybe it feels a certain way, or I see a color or whatever. And what happens is you can trigger by memory, by familiarity, that brain frequency. And this is the same with states as well. States aren't the same as brain frequencies. They're not exactly the same thing, but with familiarity, you can start to just remember what they're like and move into them at will. And literally getting some CDs of, alpha, theta, delta, beta, or whatever, you can start to get familiar and start to tune yourself in like a radio and be able to kind of enter those at will. Okay, so those are the technologies. I absolutely love all that. I'm a bit of a geek. I actually love that stuff, and it's made a massive difference. So, any questions on that? I can't cover everything. We've covered a lot, I think. But any questions on that? Feel free to message me or post a message in CE5 UK or on the YouTube channel, and I'll do my best to answer you. So what I want to do is finish. You'll be glad to hear, with some tips and tricks for your practice. I'm going to share with you what I've learned since the age of 7 with meditation. Little tips and tricks that can really make a big difference to your practice. So first of all, it's important to set aside time. Be consistent. Meditate preferably at the same time every day, because your body, brain will get, your mind and body will get used to it, a familiarity with that time of day. It's like you have your meals at a certain time of day, right? And it helps to get into the meditative state easier. Find somewhere quiet at the beginning for obvious reasons. But as you become more proficient at meditation, start to challenge yourself. Start to meditate with a bit of noise. Meditate in public. Meditate on a bus or a train. Start to bring your practice outwards, because you will then develop a deeper practice, a deeper ability to be in meditation wherever you are. Similarly, we normally advise meditating with eyes closed or half closed. But with practice, you can begin to, over time, meditate with your eyes open. And then what you do is you now stop making it so much of it's an inside experience only. It's you can be in the meditative state walking around with your eyes open. And that's one way how you transition to bringing the meditative state or higher consciousness out into your physical everyday life. That's how you integrate it. Another helpful tip is less is more. This has become my philosophy for life generally. Less is more. I was in an experiment with a scientist in Buddhist meditation years ago. She was measuring my brainwaves. One of the things she said was that it's about the repetitions. So, in other words, don't think, I'll meditate for an hour today because I got time, or it's a good thing, I'm enjoying this meditation, so I'll do loads of meditation and then not meditate for the next couple of days. Or I'll meditate today because I feel good, but I won't meditate the day after because I feel bad. Meditate every day. Just be consistent and focus on the repetitions. If it's just 10 minutes, 10 minutes is good. 10 minutes twice a day. Less is more. It's the repetitions is more important than the length of time. So less is more. Another thing, set a timer. Set a timer. The reason why is because when you're in meditation, you might be in meditation and you might be like, I'm enjoying this meditation. Let's keep going. Now that's kind of fine a lot of the time, especially if you're kind of maybe you're doing some CE5 work and you're there trying to connect or whatever, then yeah, you would keep going. It would be rude to stop, right? But if you're just doing your kind of basic meditation in the morning, which is to clear your mind, or before CE5, just say, right, I do 10 minutes at the moment and stick to 10 minutes. When that alarm goes, I finish. I won't do 1 minute less or 1 minute more. And the reason being is because we can turn meditation into another ego trip, into, okay, I'm having a good meditation, so I'll keep going. Or if I have a bad meditation, I'll stop and I'll come back tomorrow. And what this does, it creates more and more ego resistance. So you're not actually, it's going to halt, it's going to slow down your progress in meditation. Or you could even end up in really blissful states or something, but you're actually spiritually bypassing and avoiding when you're feeling, when you're not feeling so good. So have a practice and stick to it, set a timer, and meditate regardless of how you feel. It's not about how you feel, and it's not what you think. Busy mind, meditate. You're still meditating. You don't feel great, meditate. You're still meditating. It's just the awareness of whatever's coming up. And so, yeah, I think that's really important. Posture. You don't have to sit like a Buddha. You don't have to stare at your navel. You don't have to sit cross-legged. We're Westerners. Do what's comfortable, but do sit upright. When you're sat upright, it's easier to concentrate. It's easier to focus. Our spines are vertical for a reason. It's part of what makes us these conscious beings. It's the reason why in Zen, when they do sit up against a wall and they're meditating like this early in the morning, gosh, I used to do it. And they do actually have a stick. I've forgotten the name of it. And you actually get hit just here on this muscle if you fall asleep, or you can request it. And what happens is it hits you there on that muscle and you get like a jolt of energy and you just sit upright. And so to be consciously awake, it is partly related to literally just a physical wakefulness. You need to be alert, focused, switched on first of all to be able to have a successful meditation. Now, I was diagnosed with ADHD. So one of the things I learned through Ken Wilber and an integral theory was to combine exercise with meditation. And this is something that I've shared with many of my clients with ADHD. And what they've discovered is if you exercise just before you meditate, meditation becomes super easy. You're super focused, super switched on, and your body's relaxed. Because after you exercise, your body relaxes. And when your body relaxes, your mind follows. And so you can actually take on board what we learned earlier from the integral theory and incorporate that into practice. We've been at CE5s where, yeah, we were doing like maybe yoga, Tai Chi, exercise sessions, and even dancing during our CE5s when we're making contact. It's important to mind, body, and soul. If you want successful meditation, you also need to be taking care of your physical self. If you want more spiritual connection, you also need the mind and the body intact. All three must work as one. So yeah. What else? I call Zen Mudra. So in Zen, I learned this mudra. You put your hands, so your left down on your right like that, and your thumbs together like that. And they just slightly touch. And you rest them ever so lightly. Now, if you've had a bad night's sleep, I can remember I'd be at the Zen dojo and my fingers would be shaking like this and I'd be trying to keep them together, but they lightly touch. Now, when you're not tired, they should just lightly touch. But what happens is if you drift or fall asleep in your meditation, the fingers will slip. When they slip, what tends to happen is you wake up, you become aware my fingers have slipped. And so this is, in effect, an ancient form of biofeedback, letting you know that you're no longer meditating, but dreaming or sleeping. And so that's a really handy hand posture to use because it can help you stay conscious. Okay, so similarly to that, we've got mudras like that. There's other ones like this. You get all of these like in yoga, and apparently they mean different things like peace, calmness, focus. We use them in hypnosis as well, and we do use them in CE5. So in CE5, we've got some anchors. There's one where you put both hands like this, and then you open your hands up, and it activates an energy, which is a projection of energy. And through practice, this triggers that energy release. And these are what we call anchors. So when you meditate, have a specific mudra. Doesn't have to have any religious meaning or anything, because your body and mind will remember that this means alpha, this means theta, this means delta, or this means meditation, whatever it might be. You can use your body like that as a kind of like to create your own triggers. There's other ways of doing it. You can do it mentally through, like we talked earlier about visualization, using doorways and steps as a way to access theta. So there's different ways of doing it, but the mudras are very simple ways to do this. So that, I think that's pretty cool. A really helpful one for CE5 is about the eyes. So the little known thing, but the outside of the eyes is to do with relaxation. When we focus, we activate more of the rods and the kind of the electrical activity at the front of the eye, the center of the eyes. When we use the outside of the eyes, it correlates to slow electrical activity in the brain. So, for example, you can focus on one object that activates like beta, right? But then if I become aware of my peripheral vision and just use what we call soft eye focus or soft eyes, then my electrical activity slows down and I become more relaxed. And this is interesting because when we go out in nature and we see a big expanse or we look up at the stars, our eyes naturally start to relax. We're not staring at a computer screen or our phone. We're getting this expanse, and that relaxes the eyes, that relaxes the brain and changes the electrical activity. And so our eyes are another access point for meditation and for altered states of consciousness. And one of the things that CE5ers often do, even if they're not aware of the kind of technicalities of this stuff, is they will, in their meditation, talk about, meditating with their eyes open. And so definitely, even if you're not experiencing meditation, definitely do that. You can still activate these electrical rhythms, and it all comes with practice. So you do your meditation, and then maybe you're looking at the sky, and you just do this. You might imagine like a clock face turning around, and just become aware of the edges. How far can you see to the left and the right? How far can you see above and below? And that will relax your eyes, relax your brain, and help you to be in an open eyes meditation. And what that means is you're also starting to use the peripheral vision, and the peripheral vision is different from the frontal vision. The peripheral vision is where people often become aware of things outside of conscious awareness. So you start to be able to see things that you might not normally see when you're really focusing like that. You start to notice things, maybe something moves, or a light or some kind of movement. And you become aware there's things happening that you may not normally be aware of. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave it there because we actually covered everything, and that was a lot. I think we got, well, maybe, and if we're saying, well done, if there's anyone left here apart from James, well done for still being here. And I hope that was helpful learning. And maybe we can just end, if there's one here, if there are any questions and or anything that you'd like to share with me.